In January of 2010, I thought wind turbines were good and green. Through intensive research during the next month, I was shocked and saddened. I learned that my assumptions were false. A massive proliferation of these giant industrial machines, 40 and 50 stories tall, that are really industrial power plants, is underway. They actually cause great harm. This film is an effort to present the facts, to tell you the truth, to stop the irresponsible rush to wind, and to work together to find and implement responsible solutions. There is a rush to wind power all over the globe. The substantiation is that constructing wind turbines is an answer to how humans are impacting our environment. But what are the realities of living with wind turbines? You will hear the stories of people living in Australia and New Zealand, as well as hear from experts who study the impact on people living near turbines. People often wish they had a crystal ball to glimpse the future. You will see a view of our future if we continue to site wind turbines too close to people. From a distance, they may appear to be pinwheels, but the people we interviewed refer to wind turbines as industrial wind power plants with extreme dire consequences. It's a challenge to show the scale of the turbines we saw and their adverse impact upon the landscape. The 3 locations visited were once considered beautiful, peaceful, and highly desired areas to visit and to live in. Since the wind turbines have arrived, the landscape has dramatically changed. The lives of the people interviewed have been forever altered. Their property values have plummeted, and the tourists that once visited now travel to other locations. The Pandora's box unleashed by the wind turbines have destroyed people's health, their life plans, and their sense of community. Hopefully it's not too late to learn lessons from those we interviewed, as well as from people in our community and from others globally who unfortunately already are adversely impacted because they live or work too close to wind turbines. We met with people in their homes, in their home offices, and in their university offices. People told us their personal story and what they have learned, and we asked questions off camera. We were fortunate to meet with and interview 15 experts who are studying the impacts of wind turbines. Some of the experts are studying adverse health impacts to humans. They included acoustics experts, medical professionals, and psychoacousticians, those who have a background in biology, human psychology, acoustics, and how noise impacts humans. We also interviewed over 25 people impacted by wind turbines in 3 different locations. We spoke with multi-generational farmers and farmers new to the area, as well as people who are engineers, healthcare professionals, small business owners, and artists. Several had PhDs and master's degrees.
Well, I was been in this district for most of my life. Born here in 1930. Went to school at Warburg. Moved from the district for a few years, and I came back again in 1956 when I met Enid. Met Enid, and then we came to live on this farm 1957, and we've been here ever since.
Can you, I know you said, Robin, that you moved in about 3 years ago?
Yes.
And where did you move from?
We moved from New South Wales to Victoria because we wanted to have a small farm. We are interested in organic farming and sustainable agriculture, really. So we have a green aspect on life. We bought this farm because it had a lot of trees. We'd heard the government was going to bring in carbon taxing, so we bought this one because we thought we'd be carbon neutral. We have a lot of trees out there that are the old river gums, so that our animals would have plenty of shelter and that we would then be able to establish an organic farm in this area.
I was involved in planning and marketing for the industry and took roles as Director of the Energy Foundation and the Cogen Association for New Zealand. So I had a fairly expansive background. When we left there and set up our own consulting business, we consulted to many of the large companies in New Zealand, and in fact run the bid management for AES out of the States on Contact Energy, which is about a quarter of New Zealand's electricity production.
So I work as a midwife. I'm a qualified nurse and midwife, and I hold a senior position at Kaplan Coast District Health Board. I'm the Associate Director of Midwifery. I've also lectured at Victoria University in postgraduate midwifery, and I'm a PhD candidate, almost completed my PhD.
We also interviewed a journalist who covers the stories of many in Australia.
So when I left politics and went back into journalism and went back to the Courier, I thought I'd like to look at these groups who are traditionally on the fringes and are not being heard. I thought, well, maybe that's where the stories are. And the first group that I looked at was a group of farmers at a place called Smeaton, which is a small town. Well, it's barely a town, it's basically a pub now and some houses and farms around it. But the farmers out there, there was going to be a wind farm put in that area about 3 years ago. And the farmers out there got off their tractors and ran a campaign of civil disobedience against this wind farm. They never broke the law, they were never violent, but they took the fight, they took the struggle right up to the faces of the local politicians and the faces of the wind company. And I thought, this is an interesting story. How did they beat this? And they did beat it, and they won. And that really set me on a journey of looking at the wind farm issue. And the thing that strikes me about the wind farm issue, and as you've both seen, is you can't sit in the lounge rooms of people like the Deans and like the Stepnells and others, good farming people, people who are often on properties in a multi-generational sense, and not be struck by their story, by the fact that these were people going about their lives, raising families, growing food, and suddenly their lives have been turned upside down by the effect of having these turbines in close proximity to where they live. And so that's what really set me off on this journey, and continues to motivate me, is the stories of people that are affected by this trend. There's been repeated challenges, there have been, and both to me directly and to my editor. I'm in an incredibly fortunate situation. I work for a newspaper that is fiercely, although it's part of the Fairfax Group, editorial is fiercely independent. I have the backing and support of my editor 100%. Her view is that the paper has reported extensively on the benefits of wind turbines and the good things they've brought to communities. And now that I'm looking at the other side of the coin, it's simply the other side of the story. And we as a newspaper, with a responsibility to this community, I mean the paper's been part of this community for more than 150 years, that we would not be doing our job unless we looked at both sides of the issue. So I've been full support of the editor, which is great. There's been no political pressure on me at all. From within the newspaper, there's certainly been some pressure from wind farm companies and local green groups. But that's fine. That's part of being a journalist. That's if I wasn't hitting nerves, then there wouldn't be the kicks back. So that's a sign for me that what I'm doing is the right thing.
All of the people we interviewed, including the experts, had a positive view of wind energy before they did the research.
And I guess the proof of the pudding for a scientist is that many of these people who are complaining, many of these people who are suffering, they were in favour of the wind turbines. They said, yes, bring them on. Let's have them. They're a good, clean, green source of energy.
We're not against the notion of wind turbines. We just don't believe that they should be in a position where they impact on people's families and their homes and their lives. And given that the land out there is huge, I think it's something like 55 square kilometres of land out there, I didn't see any reason why they needed to be sitting in front of our faces when they could have been put much further away.
The wind farm coming to the area, when it was initially proposed, we were very supportive. We've got many neighbours who have got turbines, and we thought, well, sounds like a pretty good thing. We live in the valley, we were never going to have turbines, but that didn't matter. We thought, well, it's got to be good for the environment, good for the community.
We believe in renewable energy that, have sustainable practices. The house is built on sustainable methodologies and philosophies. So it's something that we thought was going to be good for everyone, and of course we were in the middle of a drought and we went, oh, this will be so good for those poor farmers, they need some income, so we were completely supportive.
My background was that I was heavily involved in the energy sector reviews in New Zealand and providing advice to a number of energy companies, including TransAlta out of Canada, and I had a pretty positive view of it, I guess, initially, only insofar as that I'd never been required to do the research.
They're great. They're green, they're going to sit up there all day and generate power. It's going to be cheap power because we're going to use the wind, and the wind costs us nothing.
A common thread ran throughout the conversations with people in the communities we interviewed, as well as with the experts. They all felt lied to. Lied to by the wind developers, lied to by the wind energy industry, and lied to by government officials.
He said, have you got anything against wind farms? I said, well, as long as they're not noisy. He said, no, they don't make any noise. And he said, I'll come back and see you later. I never seen him again. And then they had a community general information meeting later on. That was fairly full hall. Most of the people there had connections or was getting wind turbines. There was a few of us there that went there to get general information. But when the people who asked a question in a negative light against the wind farm were soon told that no more questions from you. And that got a lot of people very upset. And a week later they had a meeting at Warborough so that people could find information, but there was a bomb threat which disposed of that meeting. But I wasn't vocal against them, I just asked a question, and the chairman of the committee said, was I in favour or not? And I said, well, I didn't know what to think, because we wasn't getting told the truth as we should have been, because we was told there was no noise that affect humans. I never expected low frequency noise like this, because they said it wasn't going to be here, but it couldn't be further from the truth. The investigation that I commissioned proved that. It proved why we was getting ill was the pulsing of infrasound. They've never measured it.
when they first came to tell us about the turbines, they said they stood on our deck and they knew where the turbines were going to go. They said you will not hear, absolutely not hear the turbines. There will be no noise from them. And I said to them, well, I don't quite believe that, because the small turbine what they have got in town, that was noisy, and so bigger ones would be noisier. And they said, no, you will absolutely have no adverse effects from the turbines whatsoever. You will not hear them.
We thought, no, we couldn't be any problem with noise at here, because I had even asked the company about the noise at my parents' place. What would we expect to hear from 1 kilometre from the turbines? And they said, oh, you won't hear them. And I thought, oh, well, we live 3.5 kilometres from the end of the wind farm, so we shouldn't hear them at all. And unfortunately, that didn't turn out to be the case. And I looked at some of the shiny brochures and thought, well, and read all their propaganda. Well, they still send out newsletters that could only be, you go through article by article and you could just pull the pieces, it's lies. But it's not designed for us, it's designed for people who don't know. And they read this and think, geez, I wish we could have a wind farm. Ever since problems started, I mean, we put up our hand and said, well, hang on, look, what's going on here? Nobody ever told us this is what we're going to get. And from that point in time, we've been, obviously, we're anti-renewable energy, we're anti-windmill, we're anti, you know, we've just been labelled.
He actually arranged to have a big picture, a photo impression made of how they would look. I haven't got that picture anymore because it was submitted to the court, but we got a copy of the neighbour's one, and because we own that property behind him as well, and when we stand there and look up at them now, the photo representation looks nothing like what is actually there.
Why?
The representation makes them appear much smaller than they are and less visible.
The worst thing, I think, for a start was we were ignorant to the size of them and the impact, and also the heavy machinery. For a start, the amount of traffic that showed no regard for the locals whatsoever. There was 2 occasions where I had almost a collision with some of their trucks. Sam had the same experience that I know of. And then when we started to see power lines starting to go up, which we were told there were going to be no overhead power lines. And there's quite a big network of overhead power lines.
The general view was that they were to be well over the back, as they said, out the back of the second valley, that we wouldn't see them, and that at most it might be the tip of a few blades. What became apparent as the project was finally unrolled was that that wasn't true at all, that these turbines would be 111 metres tall, and that's right on the ridge directly above us, and would totally dominate our property and our views.
John was actually overseas and they had woolshed meetings, the directors, because we've got 5 local farmers who are directors down here in Harry Valley and Meridian, and all those sorts of questions were asked, and they just said, no, it'll all be quiet, you won't hear it, it's just going to be like waves lapping on a beach.
Until you're faced with this issue and have to do the research for yourself, you really don't understand how toxic and insidious these things are. But when you do the research, and if you do it sensibly, you'll find that there's some very significant problems.
We weren't particularly aware of how close they were going to be or how big they were going to be. We had no concept of the actual size. When they started talking about the height of the towers, the height of the blades, there was no reference point. And actually, I think since the initial planning application went out, they have increased the size, so we weren't actually aware of the size. And then we went down to a community centre function, and we just casually mentioned that Bern had gone to a cardiologist, her blood pressure was high, we were getting prickly head, we were getting headaches, we were getting tinnitus, and then all these other people said, yes, so are we. And at that stage we hadn't associated these symptoms with the wind farm. And then when all these other people started complaining about the same symptoms, Bern went on the internet and started doing a bit of research. And then we found out this is global. This is a symptom of wind farms. And then what we felt after that is that we were terribly deceived by the wind farm developers. They had lied to us. They had not told us about the noise. They said the noise was minimal. It would not disturb us. It's like a slight breeze whooshing in the trees. That's not correct. They know about these ill health effects. It's a case of non-disclosure. They didn't tell the landowners what to expect in terms of noise or in terms of ill health. They were gagged by the confidentiality agreements in their contracts. They did not tell the surrounding landowners what to expect. Everything's fine, it's clean, green energy. We have now turned the green energy greed energy, because this is what it boils down to. The people that are around are more concerned about the amount of money, the financial gain. So it's the financial gain of a few to the detriment of many. They're not concerned about their neighbours. The wind farm developer does not care in the least what happens to other people.
Because when we first started this, we thought we were mad. We really thought that we were, I mean, everybody kept saying, it's in your brain, you're a hypochondriac, you're this, you're that.
Politicians tell us that. Our local politicians have both said, we're hypochondriacs and whingers.
And we're out for a quid.
And we're out for a quid. We don't need their money. We are not after money. It's not.
We just want somebody to acknowledge the fact that it's making us sick.
They went to what was called phase 3, where they built the solid tower V90 Vestas turbines. Went through the process through the court system of getting resource consent to build them. The neighbours got together because we had real concerns that these bigger turbines were going to cause us a problem, even though the power companies, as it turned out, were the best liars in the world. We think they must be trained at lying. We're telling everybody how good they are, they're not going to affect anyone, the noise levels are such and such. It all turned out everything they said was wrong. The noise levels are a lot higher, it does affect people. Of course we lost, and they built the turbines, and hello, everything they told us was wrong. They do make noise, they do vibrate, they're a blight on the landscape. They give us figures of how much power they're going to produce, but it's if they're running at optimum, 24 hours a day at optimum speed. A lot of days they don't even turn at all. A lot of days they actually use power. When the wind dies and starts up again at a different angle, it takes power to turn those turbines around so they're facing the wind again. So they're actually using power. But some of them we've been to, they're just covered in oil, and these are turbines that don't leak. So it does happen. And then you ask them about that. Oh, well, yes, we've had a fault there. You'll always get faults in everything. We were wrong. Too late now. So Vestas would do all maintenance for 5 years. It was something they paid for. It wasn't a free thing. They had to pay to have a 5-year maintenance guarantee. We have heard that they will not give any guarantee whatsoever now, because it's just costing them a fortune trying to keep up the maintenance. The amount of gearboxes that are going up to the wind farm on our road, which is only 200 yards over there, they're not taking them up there to store them, they're using them because they're bringing the old ones back down again. We complained through the channels, but people thought everyone around here must be idiots. It's funny that you get a whole lot of idiots all in one area. why aren't we dispersed around the town? But we're all in one area and we're all being affected.
We began to realise that one of the big problems was the very low frequencies, and that upsets the balance system in the ear. It confuses the brain. And they won't tell you that. You know, the people who like wind turbines will not tell you that these effects happen, but they're a fact. Thousands of people across the world are being affected by them, and their complaints are going absolutely uncared for. Nobody does anything about the complaints. People who complain are often branded as crazy or insane or making things up or simply liars. These people aren't liars. What we're actually seeing is a very, very deep underlying biological mechanism which is stimulating what we as biologists call the fight or flight response. So the low frequencies in the natural environment are hardwired into us. Now they are the danger signals. They are the avalanches, that's a tree going to fall on me, that's a rock fall, or a predator coming to get me. So biologically we have evolved with all of this hardware in place so that we can detect low frequency sound. Now when we detect it, we get frightened. We try to look to where that sound is coming from. Where is the threat coming from? Unfortunately, with low frequency sound, it goes everywhere. Unlike high frequency sound, you can't tell where it's coming from, and that's more frightening. If you know that someone's about to hit you on the head with a lump of wood and you can see them, you know whether to fight that person or run away. If you don't know where the threat is coming from, you don't know where the predator is, you become extremely frightened. And what we're seeing across the world is people who are becoming physiologically affected by low frequency wind turbine sounds. That is turning on a plethora of biological responses. Those people across the world are experiencing this most primitive, this most basic response, and yet the wind turbine companies will not tell you that. Their publicity across the world says there's no danger, there's no hazard, there's no proof that there's damage. Proof is an irrelevant concept to people. If you know the thing to you, that's all the proof you need. And now, because of our technological advances, we are inadvertently affecting people across the planet. We are destroying their lives. We are making them unable to live comfortably in their homes by invading them without their permission with low frequency sounds which have characteristics, a repetitive nature, maybe even modulation, which is destroying their biological responses. It's destroying their way of life. And all we want to know is the truth from the wind turbine proponents. And it's not what we get.
Everyone we spoke with talked about the complexity of the noise from wind turbines.
So we chose 2 kilometres as the maximum distance in terms of the residents within the macro valley that we sampled. Now within that 2 kilometre zone, each of the abodes were exposed to wind turbine noise. Now wind turbine noise has very unique characteristics. Firstly, it modulates. That means that across time it is actually constantly changing in terms of its amplitude and its frequency. And not only that, but the actual modulation itself changes in relation to wind speed. So we have an auditory system that has actually evolved to pick up differences in sound. So our auditory system, like all our other senses, are what we call differential couplers or contrast analyzers, or in layperson's terms, they are apparatus that are designed to actually detect change. Now, wind turbine noise is constantly changing in time because of the modulation in the vibration of the air due to the turbine blades turning, but also as well because of the changes in wind speed across time. So you've got 2 different dynamic events occurring there, and this is why likely it is that wind turbine noise is consistently judged as more annoying than road traffic, rail or aircraft noise because of that modulation. And it will be due to that modulation that the annoyance will occur, but also the sleep disruption.
They said there would be no noise?
Yeah, the PR people and the people at the hall who came to talk to us indicated there would be no noticeable sound from these things, which is not right. The wife does, she's always awake. They've given us a hotline number to ring to indicate when the windmills or the wind turbines in our general area are noisy or not noisy. We've made a large number, probably in the vicinity of 100. We've got a stack of letters. If a front comes through and they have to change, they're very noisy. We actually get some distinct noises. We get one noise which sounds like a train going over a bridge. It's sort of a loud thunking noise. Another one, the clothes dryer that keeps on going and going. And the other one is a plane that won't go away. Then we get a thing that I can only describe as a whump, which appears to be once the turbine has adjusted itself to whatever position it is, the first noise that comes from it is this whump sort of thing. It's quite strange.
Because I was working away, next minute I felt that sort of, you know, like you're on a boat. And so I went back to the house and turned the music up really, really loud, just to get rid of that continuous bass. It was that low frequency thing what really got me. Not the loudness of the noise so much, but it's that rhythm what was really bad. And the other thing is, the best way I could describe it some days was somebody sticking a bumblebee in your ear, you know, and they continue zzz. That was horrible too.
Most of the wind farms that are being put up at the moment are being put up in rural areas, and these are areas which are known to be very quiet. That's why people go and live there. And there have how quiet the rural areas are depends upon different places, but I know of some studies that were done here in New Zealand where the team found noise levels of 9 decibels. Here you are putting industrial machines into a very quiet environment. You're putting out a lot more noise than these people are seeing, and it's hardly surprising they get upset.
So many different noises, but I always say to people, if they want to listen to wind farm, come along at 2 o'clock in the morning, because at 2 o'clock in the morning, that is the time that we often wake up. Quite often now, about 2 o'clock in the morning, you just wake up and you're just so alert. Heart's going. There's just sort of you just can't get, you just can't wind down. You sort of get wound up. And I finally got Ashiona, that's our wind farm company, to put a sound monitor in the yard at Dad's. I've seen professional equipment taking noises there, the readings, and it can't possibly be compliant. That was in May of last year. Well, it's January, middle of January now, this year. They will not repeat it. After repeated requests, I cannot get that information. So why? They've got nothing to hide.
On the one hand, you have all of the environmental variables of the wind, the direction, the humidity, the time of day, whether there are clouds or not. There's all those sorts of factors. There's the terrain and the geography, and whether there are trees, and whether there are valleys that are channeling sound, and all those sorts of things. We put that aside for a moment and we start looking at measuring sound itself. Most of the standards that I know of include a 10-minute average of what we call an exceedance, so that's perhaps the level of sound which is exceeded 10% of the time. Now that will totally miss any short spikes or bursts of sound. They won't show up on the 10-minute average. So that's not going to work. Simply giving one figure for the noise level doesn't say anything about what the frequencies of those noise are, nor does it say anything about the modulation. So the frequencies can change how easily we perceive the sound, the modulation also how easily we can pick it out of the background and how annoying it is. And Then we move on to the people themselves, because particularly at low frequencies, people have quite dramatically different sensitivities to sound. And you can have two people both with normal hearing, but one can hear a sound and the person beside it can't, or hear it quite clearly and the person beside it can't. So there are all these factors going on.
Also, it's terribly annoying when I'm working here in the workshop through the day or on the shearing shed, sheep yards, of the actual noise. Quite horrific.
How do you describe the noise?
Well,
it's like a whooshing noise. It whooshes, doesn't it, Carl?
It's almost like an approaching jet aircraft, off and on.
Yes. And some days they roar right across the range at certain times. You can just hear them like a freeway.
Some nights we'd sit in here and you could actually hear them over the telly, you know. And, you know, it's quite a modern house. It's not like a weatherboard, you know. It's, yeah.
And also with Sam and Carl and John, mainly they work outside mostly now, but they would be working in it all day, and then Sam and Carl would come into the house at night, and it, you know, it's still on and on and on.
There's no relief whatsoever.
No.
But the night times have been terrible sometimes. There's we're 3.5 kilometres north of the wind farm. We're in a very sheltered position. We have trees across the front, and it can be dead calm here, not a rustle in the trees. But up on the hills of Warborough, turbines are all pumping away, and the sound just seems to come straight through, especially if it's in the southwest. But one of the most surprising things of all was on cold, frosty mornings when we have frost down here, but it's not up there, and the noise on those mornings is just incredible. Wife even came in one morning and said, "They're noisy this morning." And I said, "Well, it can't be, the wind's in the north." So it's coming back. What we could hear was coming back against the wind. And then we've had nights where we've reported, and it's like a train only a few kilometres away, and it just goes all night. Some other times it's like there's a jet plane it's just parked itself above, and it's a different noise again.
So we started looking at this very seriously, and we not only looked at sound, that is acoustic energy in the air, we started looking at noise in the ground. We started looking at seismic transmission, and that's when I came to realise that wind turbines are actually just tuning forks glued to a hill. And what these things do, and of course a lot of companies won't tell you this, they vibrate the ground. They vibrate the air and the ground.
For me, the main impact is the sound, the sight, and the vibration.
How does that affect you?
I think the first time I became aware of the vibrations was not long after these turbines on our ridgeline became active, and I was struggling to get to sleep one night, and I had this noise coming up through the pillow, and I kept lifting my head off the pillow to see if I could hear what it was, and every time I put my head down I could hear it and feel this kind of vibration, like a machine or something operating at the other end of the house that was wiggling, you know. And it took me a while, but I realised that, you know, perfectly still night, there was no wind, there's nothing else, that it must have been vibration from the wind turbines. And so I've been aware of that ever since. And I was challenged by a lawyer in the Environment Court who said to me, "Have you read Professor so-and-so's paper about the effects of vibration?" I said, "No." "Have you read Dr. so-and-so's publication about vibration?" I said, "No." And they said to me, "Well, these esteemed people have said you cannot feel vibrations." To which I replied, "Well, they're most welcome to come and share my bed with me, because I'm feeling vibration." And, you know, I think that it doesn't matter what the experts say in their publications, it's the lived experience of people that actually count. And that's what we're hearing, and that's why some of us are going along to these environment courts to tell what our lived experience is of having these turbines right in our face. Which I do now. I go to bed tired at say 11 o'clock at night and then lay there until 2 or 3 in the morning without being able to get to sleep, and conscious of the noise from these turbines and, you know, feeling them as well.
Actually, I think the stone makes it worse because the sound bounces around inside the house. And we have noticed when we've had the windows open during the warm weather, it's not as bad as during winter when the windows are closed.
And we have heard, Bob Thorne has said, in fact, that he thinks that the sound comes in through the roof. And even though our roof we're heavily insulated, I mean, in all the walls, the internal walls are all heavily insulated. I mean, the house has been designed on good environmental principles. But the hard surfaces, they talk about that being, I mean, sound, noise, that bouncing off it. So, yeah, it's the walls are a foot thick. They're 30 centimetres, yeah. So you would have thought that it would have been, that would protect you, but no. It's a weird thing because it's not necessarily what you can hear, it's what you can feel in your body. So you're lying in bed and you can feel this, what feels like a vibration, or sometimes it's like a fizzing and a popping and a zinging in, you know, like it's like your cells are vibrating, and it's twitchy.
An itchy sensation over your body.
And sometimes your feet, it's like you've got these weird sort of aches and twitches in your feet and your legs, so you can't quite get comfortable, and so it's a really weird sensation.
And then it was found that there's 2 types of noises. There's high frequency and low frequency, and the glass kept out the high frequency noise but not the low frequency, and that's what was waking us up, because it's a noise you feel. You put your head on the pillow, you think, whoa, what's wrong with that? Something's there. It's the vibrations coming from the noise.
Heightened noise zones. So these are zones where the sounds from the various wind turbines tend to constructively interfere to give you a louder sound at that point than at other places. And in fact, there's been some studies before we got into this that suggested that these heightened noise zones were radiated out from the wind farm. So you could go along a line, and that would be an antinodal line where the noise is higher than normal, and there might be some others where it's lower. Now these can shift, of course, with wind conditions and so on. So you can have situations where 2 houses not very far apart, one of them is suffering one night, the other's not, and next week it might be the other way around. So 3 kilometres certainly, but it's highly variable. You can't sort of look at any particular place and say, well, that is or that isn't. The only way that you can find out, there's no real way of predicting. I don't think any of the prediction techniques are worth it. So we're talking about where you actually measure the sound, and studies we've done out in the field shows that, particularly because you've got multiple sources of sound, the sound will interact with each other and cancel constructively and destructively and so on. And we have anecdotal evidence of being able to stand in the middle of the road, you can hear the turbines, take 2 steps, they disappear. Take another 2 steps, you can hear them again. We've done simulations of the sound from the turbines and looked at how it might vary across even a few metres. And we've found that the simulations up to 21 decibels over a space of 4 or 5 metres. That can be the difference in the sound levels. And we've measured with arrays of microphones, and we've found across 1 or 2 metres, 12 decibels difference in sound. So you can't simply say that you can put one microphone down near a few houses and say that will tell you what the sound is. On top of that, you've got the so-called attenuation of sound inside buildings.
The wind company's noise experts will draw you a map and saying the wind farm is here, and they'll have a line around there, and that'll be a 40 decibel line, then the further line out, which will be a 35 decibel line. That is absolute rubbish. They haven't got the ability to predict it yet. What can happen here is we can hear the wind farm noise here. We can go closer to the wind farm, maybe another kilometre closer, can't hear them at all. We can not hear them here, go to our neighbours who are further away from the turbine, and you can hear them there. We can hear them on one side of our house in some situations and not on the other. How can you have what looks like a topographical lines telling you that's where the noise is going to be? As it gets further away, it doesn't get quieter, or there's valleys, there's gullies, there's trees. If you've got a night where there's really low cloud, that amplifies it. There's a number of things, and everyone's still learning.
I've been monitoring for nearly 2 years a wind farm in New Zealand, and we've got records over a really lengthy period showing the environmental sound which is bombarding the people that live in this house. Now, our equipment is quite special because it has 2 microphones, so we compare the sound outside the house with the sound inside the house, so we can see what's happening. And what we know is that there's some really incredible things happening within buildings. Now, I need to introduce you to just one little scientific concept here, and that's resonance. Now, if I take a wine glass and I tap it with a pen, it will go ding. Now, all I've done is I've put one little impulse of energy into that wine glass. It responded in the only way it could, and it sang me a little song. It sang at the frequency it could sing at. In terms of a house, houses have resonant frequencies too, funnily enough in the very low frequency region. In New Zealand, the type of houses we have would have resonances between 50 and maybe 25 hertz. That's 15 to 25 cycles a second. Now, if you build another story, you can add about 5 hertz per story. So you've got a resonant structure. So when this acoustic and seismic energy, that's the energy through the ground, comes and starts shaking the house, it does whatever it can do. It does what it has to do. It starts to vibrate. And the rooms inside are resonant cavities. So we start to see the sound being reinforced and amplified. That's what resonance is all about. It's about amplifying that sound because the wavelengths are similar. So what we're doing with wind turbines is we're turning houses nearby into 3-dimensional loudspeakers, and the people are living inside it.
They gave us pictures which were not very accurate. They talked about blade flicker, which completely put people off thinking about the noise. We were told it would not be noisy. People were told they would not hear it. We were also told that the only noise that ever is recorded is the noise you can hear, the ones that are available to the human ear. But they forgot about the low frequencies. They also forgot about animals that hear on different frequencies. So they wouldn't take our evidence. And when they came in to collect noise evidence, they did say our house was affected. At one time they came in the house, but then they said it wasn't in the standard, therefore it didn't matter. Everything has been linked to the standard. The whole of the community is suffering, but it's not in the standard, therefore it doesn't matter. That is the main problem. Nobody is considering the people. The standard is not correct. It is not for protection of people. We can never anticipate what's going to happen. The noise controls we have are a 10-minute flattening. So any sudden noises never get reported through our council, which means all noises that wake you up, the bangs, the whistles, do not get recorded. These cause you to wake up. Then, once you're awake, the constant thumping makes it impossible to go back to sleep. So we have had periods of 3 or 4 days without sleep, which makes us function as, well, we cannot function, and we cannot do our work satisfactorily. The local school had to phone up and say, could they turn it off, please? They couldn't hear the children. That was the level. At one point I was standing outside my house talking to a lady on a horse and we just couldn't hear each other. It was so bright. It was continually like a 737 about to take off and never did, and went on for hours and hours and hours. And then you had, as the blades turned or changed direction, you had creaks and bangs. When the brakes come on, you have other noises. You also have noises and flicker bangs and things that seems to happen between the wind turbines. So you have these constant noises, whines, groans, bangs.
One of their towers was malfunctioning badly. It was 10-15 degrees off the wind. It was about to probably destruct. And I rang them up and said, listen guys, your wind tower's making this dreadful noise, it's jammed, it's off the wind. They came round, 2 of them came round. They abused me, they abused Andrew, they were rude, they questioned my knowledge of wind, they told me it was an optical illusion, and I was just making a complaint for the sake of making a complaint. It took them 4 days to fix the optical illusion, but that's the sort of attitude.
It's still not right.
And it's still not right, it's jammed tonight, it's facing in the wrong direction.
And there were trucks there all day.
Yeah. But they are spinning this, everything that is going wrong is the fault of the people who are not happy with the wind towers, and we have become absolute, total and utter social pariahs. Now,
in a way, the best thing it predicts is loudness, but when it comes to actual human response to sound, which includes annoyance, judgments of the hedonic nature, for example, whether a sound is nice or unpleasant, noise level does not seem to predict any of these responses. We've had some specific data come out from wind turbines from Scandinavia, Holland and Denmark, and what that has actually shown is that overall noise level only accounts for about 20% of the variability in human responses. So to put that in lay terms, we can actually get a whole heap of people and look at the differences in responses they have to noise, and indeed we find there are huge individual differences amongst different people. And then we can go back to the noise level and say, well, how much of this difference that we find between individuals can actually be explained by noise level? And we find very little indeed. So when it actually comes to judging the health effects of noise, one should not be focusing on noise level as the be-all and end-all criteria for that. Because if one does, then they are putting the other people's health at risk. Given that the relationship between noise level and noise and human response to it, and therefore human health, is so negligible, one must answer then, well, who should be out there determining whether or not noise will be having a health impact on a particular population in a particular context and situation? So currently what we find around the world, in fact, is that acousticians who have been trained to measure the physical properties of sound seem also to have an adjunct role there in deciding whether or not noise is or is not a health effect. I feel personally that this is a very dangerous situation, especially with regards to public health. What we need over time is greater collaboration and relationships between acousticians, psychologists, psychoacousticians, people from the medical fraternity and health research areas to actually be able to make that judgment. But for the meantime now, we should not be actually asking acousticians to come forward and make a decision on health impacts.
We listened to people as they talked about the range and the severity of their health impacts. Dr. Sarah Laurie in Australia has found that people living over 6 miles from the nearest turbine are experiencing adverse health impacts and even cardiovascular. You will hear from Dr. Daniel Shepherd as he discusses findings of the scientific study conducted near wind turbines in Macra, New Zealand. You will also hear from people in Macra who live within 1.24 miles or 6,562 feet of the turbines, as well as people living at greater distances from the nearest turbine.
Yeah, well, the first thing is that the health effects for these people are real and are so debilitating that the health effects force them to make dramatic changes in their lives, to walk away from properties where they've been for many years, and in fact, often their fathers and grandfathers have farmed these properties. The other thing is that they having difficulty in being heard, in being taken seriously. They're dismissed for all sorts of reasons. The common accusation thrown at them is that they're jealous because they don't have turbines on their property. So the sickness is psychosomatic. So thousands of people around Australia, around the world, are all suffering apparently psychosomatic illnesses related to the hip pocket nerve, as we say, rather than anything tangible.
So of course what we need to now determine is that we've undertaken descriptive studies. We can now say that yes, wind turbine noise is disturbing. We can also say that yes, wind turbine noise disturbs sleep to those who are living in the close vicinity, whereas for our research we define a close vicinity as 2 kilometres or closer. So we then have to say as well, what is the mechanism in terms of the relationship between wind turbine noise on one hand and health on the other. So that's something that we've also been studying here, and it seems to be then that in the initial stages of being exposed to noise, and this finding in itself is not particularly groundbreaking. It's been found with all sorts of other noise sources, including aircraft and traffic and rail noise. But in the initial stages of the exposure, one suffers quality of life deficits, largely due to sleep disruptions, degraded amenity, and also annoyance. But given chronic exposure, that is exposure over time, what we expect to find, and indeed what they have found with aircraft noise, for example, is that the body's cortisol responses will actually increase and start damaging the body. And the reason this will be is that the brain itself and the auditory system therein cannot actually shut that noise out. Okay, we cannot habituate to this particular noise. It's almost like a reflex. Some noises we can actually filter out, okay, but others, for some evolutionary reason, our brain seems very interested in. And as I've alluded to, those noises are often those that modulate, that is, change over time. And this is exactly why when we have alert signals in society, like alarms and sirens, they actually modulate over time rather than just being one constant sound. Okay, so this lack of habituation to noise will over time actually induce what we commonly know in the lay term as the fight or flight response. Okay, and there's a part of the brain called the hypothalamus that regulates that. And through these processes in the hypothalamus, which itself has connections with very important other parts of the brain, the frontal lobe, for example, and the thalamus, the release of cortisol occurs. Now, if this release of cortisol is consistent, that is, it just keeps happening, then eventually there will be physical prices to pay for that with the body, including cardiovascular effects, respiratory effects, and according to the WHO and their 2004 study, a whole raft of other physical ailments.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that started happening?
The first time they were turned on over closest to our house, just ear pressure, headaches, nausea, just constantly feel sick all the time. And got to the stage where just the noise, sleep, just waking up, just sleepless nights, just, you know, for 14 months just was unbearable. Yeah, it was, it didn't go away until we actually left. It took nearly half an hour to an hour when you actually left the property for you to start feeling normal again. And that's when we realised that we've got a big problem.
It took me probably 6 months being exposed to them. And then I started getting heart palpitations, and 2 or 3 in the morning every night, early hours in the morning, you'd just wake up and you'd be so tired, but your eyes would be wide open and you're buzzing, you know, you just couldn't explain it, and just never settle back into sleep again.
I find our 5-year-old was probably the one, without him realising, or even us for a little while, like, he was such a good little boy, he just would go off playing, and as soon as they started spinning, he just got upset over nothing, just cry, just got very emotional, and wake up for no reason. and then we couldn't live here any longer, so we've had to move out of our home. We've been forced out of our home, and we actually live in Ballarat, which is 45 k's away, and travel out to work. But we've noticed a huge change in just himself, just off. You've got to go find him now. He just goes and plays, and he's completely different. The principal at Waubra, suffers sort of more headaches, and he's noticed a change in his health as well. So it's a huge health problem.
A couple of teachers noticed one day they couldn't explain why the kids were just so relaxed,
happy playing,
and that was a day every single it was a calm day where the turbines weren't spinning.
There was one afternoon they were only ticking away reasonably quiet, not terribly noisy at all. I was working in the yard at my parents' place, farm up there, and by mid-afternoon I just developed this extremely severe headache. It was just really tight across the forehead, and it was, I went inside and found Mum sitting at the table with her head in her hands. I said, "You're right," and she said, "Oh, headache, real severe headache." I called out the dad to put the kettle on. He came in from the garden. He's at this stage in his late 70s, and when he came in, he went straight to the cupboard, reached for the Panadol, and going on about this headache. And there was only sort of a moderate wind, but it was an extreme headache, sort of developed through the day, and then there's heart palpitations. It's just like you'd been for a run, but you hadn't been. You might be just doing fencing or something like that. Well, fencing is what I was doing that day. An extremely bad night. We just felt like your heart was going to jump out of your chest. It was just a terrible, terrible feeling. I went to the doctor 2 days later. My blood pressure was down to 120. Again, it was just back to normal. But monitoring our blood pressure, and I monitor mine just morning and night. Recently had a 24-hour monitor on, and despite the fact I didn't really think, I thought I was having a pretty good day, but it sort of been, well, I'm on medication now because of the results of it, but I'm normally only 120 or actually 117, and the nighttime one was the one that sort of bothered him because while I was asleep, it was sort of going up pretty high. But that was a night that they were going, but it wasn't a night that would keep you awake. And now that I'm taking medication, it's sort of caused another bit of problems because I get sort of lightheaded when the turbine's not going, or if you go away. And I mean, that's another thing. You go away. What are you doing? You're driving. The tractor the other day at the stop for a while, and then the shearing shed up at Dad's, and I had to sit down for a while. I just giddy. And that's something I hadn't sort of been having problems with.
Yeah, the problems, I'm getting dizzy spells, nausea, basically sometimes really sore ears, just in the back of the ear. And basically being put off balance, that's the biggest issue for me. 1 week I didn't sleep for 4 nights because I could not go to sleep. And I was absolutely beside myself because you had it during the day, you had it during the night. And at some stages I actually had to go and leave the house and go somewhere else because I couldn't stand it anymore. When I leave for the whole day, I feel actually really, really good. And then I came back and I felt the same way again as before when I was there. Dizzy, feel a bit of sort of stomach sick. It was awful.
For me, the impact is from the wind turbines is about sleep deprivation, and I do find that I have a lot of difficulty sleeping. I can hear the turbines nearly all the time. I sometimes have trouble getting to sleep. I often wake up in the middle of the night. I tend to go to work every day feeling like I haven't had enough sleep. And that impacts on my ability to function in my senior level at the hospital, but it also affects seriously my ability to concentrate when I'm doing my work at home on my PhD. Well, for instance, my husband doesn't seem to be as conscious of the noise of the turbines as I am, and I think that's because of his hearing deficit. He's got hearing loss, and so he's not hearing them like I do, and he's not apparently experiencing any problems. However, he's finding himself to be quite lethargic and very tired at the end of the day and needing to have a sleep in the afternoons and things. So I think that, you know, even though he may not be aware of the noise from the turbines, it is having an effect on his sleep. I have resorted to taking mild sleeping tablets, which I hate to do, but I simply can't afford to be going to work on 2 or 3 hours of sleep a day.
It was one night I woke up and my heart was absolutely racing. I had shortness of breath. This has never happened to me before. It was just came out of the blue, and I woke Gunter and said, listen to my heart. And I really thought I thought I was about to die. And
no, we were concerned that it was a stroke coming on.
Next month, on various occasions, I had a similar attack, once while I was gardening, another one at night. So I went to the doctor. The doctor took my blood pressure, and he went, right, you must go to a cardiologist immediately. He was panicked by what had occurred. There were headaches that just started to happen occasionally, and these odd palpitations.
And what I call a prickly head sensation, and it's like you've got these prickles and something pressing in all the time. Okay, last September I went to my doctor and had a regular blood pressure test. I was shocked when it was 157 over, I think, 97. Because historically, I've seen the same doctor for over 20 years, and historically, my blood pressure has been in the range of the 120s over 70s.
The emotional swings that occur, I mean, it's a real roller coaster. I mean, there are days where a huge black mood can descend and you just don't really understand what's going on.
When we go to Melbourne, we don't experience these symptoms. And we might go to Melbourne several days at a time. We stay with friends. We don't experience this.
Although the dispersal of the symptoms takes much longer now. It's
to when admission started.
Yes.
If I'm not careful, it'll take me out because I start suffering from, they say, sleep apnea, but what happens is that if I'm out here, I'll get contractions of the chest, pains in the chest, and I stop breathing during the night. There's no way that anyone should be subject to this. This is torture. This is vibration torture. Pollution from these things can go, infrasound pollution can be fairly strong 10 kilometres away. It's just the further you get away, the spots might be further away, but most certainly, as Dr. Laurie has found, 5 kilometres is hardly a safe distance.
I'd say 2 months after it come on full production, that I started getting headaches and things like that. But initially I had no idea it was that. I was thinking there was some other problem. I've never had headaches in my life prior to that, so I was beginning to think that there was something else going on. And it wasn't until I heard on the radio that another neighbour was having issues and he thought it was the wind farm. So then we started to put it together.
I went to the doctor and he thought it may have been thyroid or vitamin B deficiency or sugar diabetes. So I had all those tests and they came back clear except for vitamin B12 was low. So they gave me vitamin B12 injections. But then I started getting vibrations in my lips. And then they didn't sort of go away. So I went back to the doctor and they did more blood tests and everything comes back fine. And then I started getting arms and legs tingling, and then the vibration sensations in my chest and heart palpitations, and all when I was mostly asleep. So I could wake up in the middle of the night with a heart start, like something, and think, oh wow, what was that? My heart would thump, and it feels almost like there's a mobile phone vibration somewhere, like you've got a mobile phone attached to your body, and that vibration sensation. It goes away mostly when I get up of a morning and start walking around, but it's there most of the night, and it's there mostly every night. So I now wake consistently somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m. in the morning with some sort of feelings in my arms, legs, vibrations. Sometimes I get headaches, depending which way the wind is blowing or if you can hear the turbines.
We're both starting to suffer extreme blood pressure problems. Earlier last year, I had a bilateral knee reconstruction, which shows what a thrill seeker I am. And I was in hospital for 8 months, rehab and the operation. And my blood pressure was so low, they had to reschedule all my activity. My blood pressure in the morning now is usually somewhere about 150 over 110 with a pulse rate of 95 or 98. Now, there is no explanation as to why that is happening. I suffer from anxiety attacks, which is absolutely ridiculous. I'm a psychologist, I should know how to handle that, but it happens. I think I can't do this. Really simple tasks that I would normally think nothing of doing, I can get myself into an absolute tiz over. I get really emotional about things that are not worth getting emotional about. I get really, really bad headaches, but I get headaches for no reason at all. I wake up at night, I don't sleep for longer than about 2 or 3 hours in a session, and I wake up and my pulse is going like crazy. It's like I've had a nightmare.
Well, I think it plays up with my sugar, because at different times, you know, the way the noise and everything else, and then the blood pressure, and then the pains in the head, irritability. Well, perhaps I might have got a head start on that one, I don't know. But at any rate, it makes me worse. I don't know, things... Oh, and you see people around not talking to each other and... Nah, it's horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not the place we came to live, and...
No, it's changed everything.
Yeah, everything's stuffed up. But the main thing is the headaches and the eyes, you know. Some days it's very difficult to see properly. You can see, but you can't focus properly. You know, it's a terrible feeling. You know, some days I go to bake and I just can't do it. It just knocks me. I just can't do it. And, you know, it just depends on those things, whether they're going and coming this way. You know, it's terrible. It does, because I have that sleep apnea, and yeah, and the machine picks the noise up, and it really does your head in some nights. But I'm starting to try and get used to it. But all the time that noise is going through your head, and I'll tell you what, it really does your head in, and it's cruel. It's like a torture.
And their expert, Mr Hayes from Hayes Mackenzie in the UK, said there's absolutely no infrasound from these turbines. It's not an issue. It's below the levels that can be detected by humans, and you certainly should not worry about it.
suddenly feel this tightening in my chest and your heart rate lifting, and it was a horrible feeling, like you were almost going to have a heart attack, and you'd be sound asleep some nights and you'd wake up feeling your chest really tight. Walking in the house, my ears used to get really sore, and I knew then that these things were going. I've had to change bedrooms quite a lot at different times.
Palpitations in the heart, difficulty breathing. I think that it probably leads to circulatory problems with people, and headaches. I mean, I can drive up over this wind farm, and I've done it several times. As soon as I get within range of the turbines, I start getting a headache through the centre of my head here. You can go around the corner where you're sheltered from it and it disappears. It's just instantaneous. Switches on and off.
I've also developed tinnitus too, and I can pinpoint it to the exact night when I was woken at 3 a.m.
And remember, we're 4.5 kilometres from the nearest turbine and probably 6-8 from the centre of the field. Absolutely. I mean, I know there's probably in this community down here where the turbines are built, there's at least half a dozen people who on a regular basis have to make alternate sleeping arrangements. They cannot maintain sufficient sleep to maintain their employment by staying in their homes. Children and elderly are most affected by that infrasound. I mean, to give you an example, Philippa's father was down staying with us the other night, and he's 92. He's got, he's getting a little bit unsteady on his feet, but he gets around, he walks with a stick, and he's reasonably sprightly. He stayed in our home for a night when the turbines were particularly bad, and we've been particularly careful not to talk about it to them, knowing that they'd worry about the whole deal. So he really doesn't know anything about them at all. But he woke in the morning and was so unsteady he couldn't get out of bed. He just lost his equilibrium entirely.
And he improved once we took him out of the valley.
As soon as we're out of the valley, he was back to normal.
I've owned a property in Macra for 20 years. We lived there until February last year, when we were forced to move out owing to health issues. We still maintain the property, we still farm, but we never sleep at the house.
So we have to examine the current state of research in noise, and what we find is that we have numerous reports describing correlations between noise and health. And we find these reports, some of them over 50 years ago, looking at aircraft, traffic, rail noise and neighbourhood noise, for example. And we have to say, well, okay, where is the smoking gun for that? Where is the mechanism that tells us that this noise is actually causing adverse human effects? Now, this takes a lot of research and a lot of money, and in a way we can draw a parallel here between what we saw with tobacco and what we have with noise at the moment. So doctors back in the 1930s began actually raising the alarm, if you like, saying that tobacco is actually very harmful and we should actually have public health programs to minimise its use. Now, it wasn't actually until the 1990s that we actually really saw an acknowledgement from companies who sell tobacco and government agencies that yes, tobacco is harmful for health. And the reason that is that there is an argument that says correlation does not infer causation. So even though the correlations were rather large in terms of tobacco and health, they still argued that we should not worry about it because we have not actually found a smoking gun. Now, we have an exact parallel with noise at the moment, but I believe personally that the mechanisms involved, the underlying mechanisms that link noise to poor health, are actually going to be a lot more easier to uncover than what those were with tobacco and health.
People told us about other adverse impacts. We even witnessed an ecotourism, quote-unquote, location that touted the benefits of wind, but we could see no one else visiting, even though it was during the height of the tourist season. Here we could witness firsthand blade glint and shadow flicker. This was not certainly a benefit of wind, and something I could not tolerate living with.
their PR man for this region, and basically he told us that there was going to be no problems, they wouldn't be visually offensive, they wouldn't be noisy, they wouldn't affect the landscape as you could see it. We haven't had much trouble with glint, but the flicker is quite noticeable, especially in the beginning of summer and at the end of summer, because the sun starts moving across the western horizon in a different level. It comes across lower, so we get a flicker into the house and into the garages.
Did they tell you there were going to be problems? Or
there would be none. There would be no flicker, no glint. They gave us charts that showed us how far the flicker and glint would go, and they were wrong.
And certainly the people from Meridian Energy, when they sent their spin doctors, I call them, around to talk to each of us individually, they completely downplayed the possibility of us having any effect at all. He clearly said to us there would be no possibility that we would hear those turbines at that distance, and that things like shadow flicker, blade glint, not a problem. They were very clear that it was going to impact us very little. But I know that when I'm in my office looking out the window, I can see the shadow flickering around on the hillside, and although the shadow doesn't actually get to my house, it's in my visual field, and it's disturbing to me when I'm doing my work.
We were lied to about the noise, we were lied to about the lights, we were lied to about the whole disaster. We can't move because it's our life and it's our home and we don't want to move. We have to put up with it. One of the things that worries me most of all is, and it sounds really stupid because I'm not epileptic or anything, is the red flashing lights, which I don't know if you've experienced, but from my kitchen window I can see 17 of them going night from just on twilight until just after dawn, and it's like living in downtown Amsterdam. You've just got these, and it's constantly stressful.
We asked people who spoke to us in 3 locations close to wind turbines about their own property and also about real estate close to the wind turbines.
There are people who have been physically displaced because they can no longer live by the turbines. A number of people have shifted from these communities. They've sold up their land. They've lost money. The value of their land has been degraded. They've now had to shift away to somewhere where they can live in peace and harmony, where they can feel well, where they don't suffer the fight or flight response, where they don't suffer being woken up at night, where they don't get that continual anxiety and fear because of that basic system triggering a biological function which is deep down in the wiring of the brain of all animals.
Because we had to buy a house, we moved out from the area. We've had to take a mortgage out to buy a new premises to protect his health. We have fought Meridian since 2005, before, during and after construction. The wind turbines, one of them is partially on land claimed by us. We are still fighting that. And people have moved out. We've lost about 3 or 4 neighbours, have gone.
Our understanding is that the people who owned it were told by our health department that no one was to live in this house because the ill effects of the turbines, which were extremely close, they were probably, there'd be a few turbines within a kilometre distance to it. It was unhealthy for them to live in there. They couldn't. They were instructed that no one was to live in this house. The power company bought the house. They relocated them into something nicer and made them a nice financial payout. Also, when they do that, you sign a bit of paper to say you can't talk about it. But people can talk about it privately, and they do. And our understanding is that it was the low frequency noise setting up the vibrations in the house. That was the problem. This same house, one of the people in our society that was formed to fight the wind turbines, actually themselves saw a full glass of water put on the windowsill and the water vibrating over the edges. Before the consent was even granted, we spoke with the power company people. We were bringing up our objections, and one of our objections was, is it going to devalue the value of our land? And they said, no, we're seeing it now. Oh, people are saying, I don't think I'd buy up there. It's too close to the wind farm.
Your neighbours that have been affected, have any of them considered leaving their homes?
A lot of them have. Yeah, there's a lot of houses, a lot of, several from around this area. 13 homes have been, now Warburg's not that big of a place. The wind farms bought out quite a few places. Some of those are on visual, because of visual reasons. We know damn well that they were for health reasons, but they, for some reason they can't admit that. A lot of the places that have been bought at Warburg have been paid market value or even above, but they were bought by the wind farm. So statistically, prices have not dropped. But there are places that still can't sell. There's a lot of places around. There's some people have gone as far away as Tasmania. Just to, they've got to play into a place where they thought, well, they can't do turbines here, so and unfortunately, some people who have, one person has left only to have a, because of the wind farm, only to have another one proposed right next to it.
8 houses have been bought out by the company.
It's the small
and those
farms.
people have moved out and those houses are just sitting there empty now.
The farms that they were buying out, it was people. For instance, if you bought a property and you had a, 25 acres and a house, somebody from Ballarat, Melbourne or wherever would come out because it was a nice district. And one lady loved it. The Pyrenees were her view. And now, then she only had a view of wind towers. So she did complain and went through all the procedures and they bought her out. So, as Val said, that's got to be an admission of a problem.
Yeah, there's more places in, like just little, just houses in Ballarat, like in Warburg Township that aren't for sale. Well, if you try to sell your farm, I don't know who would want to live here. It's a, it's probably not a saleable item, really. It's a huge problem.
And you can't rent, we can't rent this house.
An estate agent who handles farm properties said that he had some properties for sale, 2 of them, and they'd almost get to signing up, but then wind towers would come up, and that wasn't in this particular district, but where another wind farm is.
It's planned.
So it was planned. So these people were reluctant to sign for these properties. So you could say, or you would say, that land values have and will decline.
He's had the place on the market for over a year now. He's changed agents in the last month, but prior to that, he had 1 visit. And the people said, too close to turbines. Yet that agent had a website, and for that particular house, they had 1,100 hits to have a look at the house. And only 1 person came out to physically view the house and said, no, too close to wind farms.
Her house was on the market for about 15 months before the wind company actually bought the house. And that was after it was discovered that the noise they were non-compliant for noise at that house. But Kay's story was that people came out to see the house, they loved the house, and as soon as they saw all the turbines, I mean, they were surrounded, and you'd see a turbine from every window, they just went, no, we don't want to live this close to a wind farm. So as much as everyone says it doesn't affect, it certainly does.
Definitely does affect.
And we do know that Acciona, the wind developer, has bought quite a number of properties, and of course they buy the properties at a good price because they don't want those prices to be reflective, to say that there's a problem.
Yeah, they have. I know that there have been 2 or 3 or maybe even more families that have actually moved since the turbines have been here, and that's been part of it. I mean, I think all of us in the early stages were concerned that it would affect our property value.
Don't
compensate.
Don't listen, don't compensate. I mean, we said to the developers at the time, you're telling me that this thing's going to be fine and dandy. Everything I read tells me it's not. Why should I take the risk? Why don't you sign a sale and purchase agreement with me now, and I'll sell you the property. If I can't live in it, I don't want to leave. I bought it because I want to be here. And if it's all as good as you say it is, well then that's not going to be a problem. And you know, and we don't. So sign the paper. I know we don't do that. Certainly I know properties that have been close to being signed up. I've got very good friends who's a real estate agent, and people come down here, listen to the turbines, so if that's going to be there, I'm not buying, and then they walk away. And so we've seen land value offers on land drop to 25% of the original selling price when people understood the impact of the turbines.
The adverse impacts for communities from a public health standpoint are only beginning to emerge. Community fracture was described by residents in all 3 areas that we visited.
Unfortunately, the social result of that is that this is now splitting societies. It's splitting communities. The people who are affected and are deeply worried and deeply troubled against the people who can't understand because they're not being affected.
They're not being heard, they're dismissed, and the other thing is how divisive wind farms are in communities, how they can split communities down the middle. Often wind farms and wind farm proposals are done surreptitiously. Wind farm companies come in and hold confidential or secret negotiations with prospective landowners. Those landowners are asked, requested or forced to sign confidentiality agreements. What I'm talking about is the effect on communities, how the wind farm companies seem to operate, and the lasting and ongoing split that occurs in communities where wind farms are located.
The community's been destroyed. The community of Warborough has. This wind farm has pitted neighbour against neighbour. 5 generations of neighbours that have been in this area, they do not talk to each other, they abuse each other, they insult each other, there's been violence, there's been death threats, there's been destruction of property.
Assaults.
Yeah. There's neighbours time their visit to the local general store where they pick up their milk or their newspapers or whatever like that. They time it so they don't run into other neighbours because there is a conflict.
And the local pub, the Warborough pub, closed down recently, and one of the reasons was, well, what happened was that people stopped going to the pub because they didn't want to bump into their neighbours and they didn't want to have that sort of friction, so everyone went to drink everywhere else, so they lost their clientele. And then they've been trying to sell the pub, but every time someone came to see the pub, they looked around and went, turbines, too close. And so indeed the Warborough pub just closed its doors. They couldn't sell it, so they just closed its doors.
Our neighbours don't talk to us. We get really sour faces from people that were very good friends of ours, and they look the other way. Both neighbours are directors, so it's pretty quiet around our way. It's not a friendly place like it used to be. It's really split, and there's many friendships and families split over it. It's really quite sad, actually.
It's absolutely black and white. There's sort of half a dozen landowners who are supportive of the project and totally blind and deaf to any contrary view. There's virtually all of the rest of the community who are opposed to it, and there's probably a small group who were very close friends of the farmers before, who are sitting on the fence but often been said that a lot of them are not entirely happy about the whole concept either.
Caused the biggest split in this community there ever was. But here, it's the one family, everyone else is against it, no one speaks to them. I wouldn't like to live their lifestyle, no one talks to them.
We've had the guts to stand up and say, we don't think this is, the best thing that's happened in the world. We have been ostracised, we've been threatened, we've had property damage. We cannot go into the local store without being abused. We heard this loud thump and Andrew thought, oh, I wonder what's happened. Went out to collect the bin and there was our bin and our rubbish all over the road. And the guy who was driving the garbage truck standing there scratching his head saying, do you know this mad guy who drives a cattle truck that's red and white? And we said, yes. He said, he just ran over your rubbish bin.
He feared to get it. And
He literally, but he was being followed by the Shire rubbish truck, the garbage collector, who said, he drove off the road to total your bin.
I think in a lot of ways our civil rights have been infringed upon. Our property rights, our right to freedom of speech, our right to freedom of association, and the vilification of the people that we consider our friends now is extreme. Our politicians have let this happen, and it's truly disgusting. I mean, this is not about money, this is social justice.
And democracy.
And supposed democracy.
There's a lot of my neighbours who pretty much drive off, dodge people on the road. So, it's a dangerous place out there for some of them. I've been lucky that most of them still talk to you. The community doesn't exist. There's friendships that go back generations. There's that are dissolved. They're gone. They're finished. It'll take a generation after the turbines are gone to maybe rebuild that.
People in New Zealand consider amenity very important. Amenity is what brings people to an area and what keeps them in this area. In fact, wind turbines have been turned down based upon visual amenity in New Zealand. Amenity and quality of life are indeed of most importance to many people.
If you buy a property in the country, you would like to have the a peaceful life. There's different noises. There's natural noises, from cows and all that. But you don't expect industrial noise in a countryside. And because we bought our place 10 years ago, we bought it for that reason, to have peace and quiet and do what we like to do. So, and that's the thing what I am really objecting to with the turbines, because they actually stole our peace and quiet.
Much, I'll admit it. I was quite happy here. Our quiet's beautiful, and it is a beautiful spot here, and everybody that comes out from the towns love it, And now people, now you see these things going up, and it's just a horrible sight, and it aggravates me greatly. Well, yes, I used to hate leaving here to go on holidays, but now I look forward to it, to get away, escape.
It's destroyed the environment we grew up in. Dad's been here for 80 years. I've been here for 51 years. Why would I want to be anywhere? I've been other places that are great to visit, but you don't realise what until you actually talk sometimes to people who are newcomers to the area, and you talk to them and you think, and they go on about how beautiful it is and everything, and you think, yeah, well actually it is. And no, it's totally, the environment we grew up in is gone.
And Yeah, but I could see a major difference in Carl and Sam once the wind towers started up, that they just weren't themselves. They weren't the happy, carefree people that they were. And it was sad. And their daughter, she was going to sleep on the school bus to Ballarat, which was unusual for her.
And then, the flashing lights. So you can't open the doors to let the breezes through your house. The company says, oh, we'll put windows on your house, the
double glazed
windows and
extra insulation.
All your drapes and all. What are we supposed to do? Lock ourselves in the house? I mean, we're at a farm where you work outside.
Yeah, that's the problem. You're sort of living with them visually, the sound of them, and then at night time there's still no respite because of the red lights. You're never free of them. Every time you look up, you see them.
And the wind drops, and then they all stop. Fairly constantly. There's plenty of days where the wind drops and there's not a single turbine spinning, and you can just feel that you know that.
Your body's just relaxed.
You know without even looking at them.
You do.
And they're the good days, but then they get going, and you just know, when they get going, it's almost twice as bad again. When they get going, and you can feel it.
The local water schools really suffered. Our son no longer goes there. There's been probably 10 kids have left the school because of the Water Wind Farm. There's been quite a few families that have moved because of it. And the school even noticed, the behaviour of children when the turbines are on to when the turbines aren't spinning. Just the behaviour of the children in the classroom.
Just sadness.
Not a positive thing.
And nobody can convince the majority of thinking people that it is the answer for green energy.
Well, it's completely destroyed our quality of life. We love our farms, and it's completely destroyed our, a day on the farm when they're roaring and they've just destroyed our lives. We've had to move.
Yeah. Yeah, and we worked the farm. Carl and Sam really managed the property, but we would come here and have a cup of coffee and a meeting over the kitchen table. But now when I come up here, times the house is empty, or we pop in for a cup of coffee, but it's not a family home anymore, and that's sad. And we do miss it, Belle and I, as grandparents and father of Carl and Sam. We had a good relationship, still have, but it's more. There's a lot of things apart from the health situation. It's emotional as well. So that's what you're up against, is money, and people don't care about disfiguring the countryside.
We've decided we will leave in another 2 years' time. When my husband's ready for retirement, we'll go. We won't stay here, which is disappointing, because this is where we had chosen to live because of the nature of the rural setting and the beauty, and we thought it was a beautiful place to be without a row of turbines in front of us, but we will leave.
It's changed our life. We have maintained a quality for ourselves, but we've changed our abode, we've changed our travelling, we've changed our social group. It's completely undermined the life we had. We maintain a quality because we're setting up new networks, we're still working, we're working with the people, we're working with the community, but it's been a deliberate destruction of everything we had built up over 20 years.
And it wasn't until it was actually built and operating. I mean, the horror started happening when it started to sprout up on the hillsides, and we're going, oh my goodness, they're big and there's a lot of them, and
they're very large.
It's really transformed the horizon. That was a shock, and because you're tired and you're not quite well, you don't enjoy things as you used to do. You don't. Driving home from Melbourne and you look across and there's all the flashing red lights. You used to be able to look and think, oh, we're going home. But now you look across and you see the red lights, and there's a slightly sinking feeling about going home. And I mean, that's one of the greatest things that is so distressing, is that your home has been taken away. Your sense of safe haven, the place where...
The environment's been destroyed.
Yeah, they've taken home from us.
The environment, we created this environment for a specific purpose that has been taken away. It is no longer the same environment, and that is not by our choosing.
We asked every person we interviewed, what would you tell others who are in the communities where wind turbines are proposed?
I've had a lot of people contact me here about proposed turbines and so forth. And personally, despite the fact that I thought they were pretty good to start with, I wouldn't live within 5 kilometres away. The back of my property here is over 5 kilometres away. And even working there against the state forest, some days it's just as noisy as here.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even like to live down the back. And yeah, if you've got turbines coming anywhere near you, fight them with everything you've got.
I think it's useful for families or people who are faced in this situation to form some form of group that can work together to share information and share research and really become quite knowledgeable about it. But the thing that I guess that's most important is just don't believe what they say. Go and find out the information yourself, because their vested interest is simply and only for themselves and not for the community.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Fight as hard as you can.
Do your own research. Don't believe a word they say. Go on the internet, research it, talk to other people. With the internet you can talk globally, listen to other people's experiences.
Question. Be sceptical.
Be very sceptical.
Be very sceptical and research and organise and stand up and build with other people, because there's so many people that have already experienced this, so you can build on what people have already done and work with, and don't be intimidated. Don't let yourself. No. Stand up and fight.
Try to stop them. Really try hard to stop them, because it has got bad effects on people.
So what are you going to do if a power company comes to your area and decides that they're going to invade your personal space and put up a wind farm? What I think you should do is challenge them. The onus is not on you to prove the safety. The onus is on them to prove the safety. They will tell you the science is all over. It's finished. There's no need to do any more research. Well, I can tell you something as a scientist and a philosopher of science. The science is never over. It is never finished. Science is a continually evolving platform of knowledge. It's never over. There's always more to find out. So if these guys come to your town and say, hey guys, we want to give you some wind turbines because they're really cool, you say, prove it. So you have to challenge them and get them to answer all of your questions before you allow this travesty to be inflicted upon you. It's up to you now. Go away, look it up, research it, challenge them.
On the one hand, you've got the consultants are trying to do, and the lawyers are trying to do the best for their clients, so they're going to put the best case forward, and they're not going to argue the opposition's case. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that most of these consultants are acousticians, so they're all about measuring sound, and they have their sound standards and they stick by the sound standards. Now, it never occurs to people that the standards may actually not be up to the task in these particular areas. And it is one thing to try and measure the sound where someone is. It's totally a different matter to try and find out what is the effect of the sound upon that person. So how do they perceive it? And to understand that, you have to be a psychoacoustician. You have to understand both about sound and the perception of sound by people. And this is where you find that what we know today is not simple. It's far more complex than that. And so the sound standards they've got a long way to catch up with what's going on here. What they're saying is there can be no further debate, and as far as I'm concerned, science without debate is propaganda. It's as simple as that. There is no fact that we can say is proved for all time. Everything's open to debate.
So you think more research is necessary?
Absolutely.
Continuing research?
Absolutely, particularly in this area.
Well, from our research over the last 3 years, I can tell you that we've got a population of people who are seriously affected, whose lifestyle has been affected, whose quality of life has been damaged up to 5 kilometres away. So 2 to 3 miles away. When I talk to people, they often ask me, well, what's the safe distance? I have no idea. What I can tell you is that within 2 kilometres, it's a danger zone. 2 to 5 kilometres, you're going to be affected to some degree, possibly extremely. 5 to 10 kilometres, you may be affected, but less so. Because of the physics and the variability, there is no way of predicting a safe distance. And because of the way the physics works in the environment, which is what a lot of acoustic people don't understand, it changes. It's like the weather. It changes from where I am here at the moment to where I shift to somewhere else. The sound moves around, it changes. It's not static because of the environmental conditions and in particular the weather, the temperature gradients. All of these things you can look up in the literature. Don't believe anything I've said. Go look it up. It's on the internet. Look at the book that we've written. Look at the books other people have written. Look at the scientific papers. Look at the PhD thesis of Dr. Thorne, who's a consultant in the psychoacoustic area. Look at the work of Dr. Daniel Shepherd. Look at the work of Dr. Fritz Vandenberg, whose PhD was on this. And I believe, if my memory serves me, that one of his comments was, for people whose business is wind, they seem to know very little about it. And that's what we're finding. So I can't tell you a safe distance, but I can tell you within 5 to 10 kilometres there'll be an effect. Under 5 kilometres that effect may be quite serious, and closer than that, I believe, personally, my professional opinion as a scientist is quite dangerous.
When it comes to legislating noise, for example, coming from wind turbines, there are really 2 ways or approaches that one can go about it. In terms of actually having some hard criteria that will be accepted by legal courts and civil bodies. The first is the noise levels, which I would argue are a very poor protector of public health. The second is the idea of the setback distance. And I think of the 2 approaches, I think the setback distance myself is the lesser of 2 evils. Just because one, however, determines a setback distance does not actually mean that anybody outside of that distance will be free from health effects. And this, I think, ultimately becomes a societal decision, is that we know that living very close to wind turbines, say 200 metres away, is going to cause widespread health effects in the population. We know when we take that up to 2 kilometres that the prevalence there is going to be a lot less, perhaps anywhere between 10 and 20%. Beyond 2 kilometres, we will find a drop-off accordingly. So how to set up a setback then really becomes a societal question in terms of how many people do we want to suffer from this particular type of noise. So my own opinion on that, of course, as I hope anyone's would be as little as possible. So from the data we've collected here in New Zealand and from what we've seen elsewhere around the world, I would probably say a safe distance. And of course, one must also take into account whether they're looking at flat ground or hilly terrain, but a safe distance has to be beyond 2 kilometres, perhaps 3 kilometres, perhaps 4 kilometres. The final decision that will be made, I think, has to be informed by further research and data that we do not have access to at the current time.
When I first came across wind turbines, I thought they were spectacularly beautiful and a very good thing. The thing that I cannot get away from, though, time and time again, is the human cost of these things. And for me as a journalist, that's where the story lies, that's where the issues are, and that's the thing that I need to continue pursuing. Because these are good people, innocent people, and their lives are being turned upside down in a scorched earth approach that is a story that needs to get out there and needs to be told.
If there, as the power company said, they didn't affect us, we wouldn't be doing that. We just want to warn other people of the problem. And we've been trying to tell other people. Some people listen to us and other people don't. Then they'll come back later on and say, whoa, what you told us was true. They are terrible things. They are causing us health problems. They're keeping us awake. We didn't believe you. We couldn't make it. We can't make anyone believe us. We can only tell them how to fix us.
None of us want to be doing it. Everyone wants to get back to their own lives and the peace of their lives. But if we don't stand up and if we don't tell our story, then there's all these people that are going to end up suffering what we're suffering and our neighbours. And that just is something that cannot happen.